I've written a pre-prepared statement, just waiting for people to arrive. Then I'm just going to stream for a little while and just generally talk about Russ and what happened with this channel exactly. That's another reason I've done this stream. Yes, the link is in MFM, Mike. You can hear the sound, that's okay, yeah, that's all I need to know. I got red wine, because Russ used to drink wine, didn't he? And this is a funny one. It's called 19 Crimes, The Uprising. And all the pictures on the bottles are criminals that were about to be punished by deportation. Because at one point in England, they punished you by deporting you to Australia, thinking that you was going to just die out there. But actually, they didn't. They founded Australia as we know it now. And this is the last office on them. Yeah. Some wine. Right, yeah. Speak in the chat if you've got anything to say. And I'm going to read out the pre-prepared statement that I'd made. Okay, I'll start doing that now. Russ Figaredo passed away recently. Apparently, he was found after suffering cardiac arrest. He had a wife and young children who I'd like to offer my condolences to. I've wanted to post some kind of update video to this channel for a while to explain a few things and offer people other better resources and information regarding the Charles Manson case. And this seemed like a good time to do it, as I also commemorate Russ, because Russ was part of the reason that this channel even began. Russ and I were originally moderators of a true crime Facebook group, and Russ liked to live stream to this group. He wanted to start some kind of Saturday show or podcast where we discussed true crime, had a drink, and wore vintage clothing. It was originally going to be called True Crime and Cocktail Time, but we quickly found out there's already a true crime podcast called something very similar. So we changed the name to True Crime and Moonshine. I showed Russ how to use StreamYard, and we set up the YouTube channel as a place to archive these streams. What you see here was never intended to be a finished podcast, however. We were testing the software and trying to work on a format, etc. And it quickly became apparent Russ was quite a lazy researcher too. He expected me to do all the work and also didn't want to help set up better software to make the streams appear more professional either. That all would have been left to me. He was also difficult to work with for a number of other reasons that I will get into or not as the stream goes on. You will notice I stopped working with Russ after the first few videos too, and he was replaced with Beckham, who you may recognise from the Paulcast MDP channel. These things were all happening during the COVID lockdown too, so we had a lot of time on our hands to make these podcasts and be reading documents about the Manson case and that. I've left the streams up as I feel we did usually get across relevant information from the actual crime scene reports and autopsy reports, etc. People are very critical, saying we made a lousy podcast, etc. But please understand, this was never the finished result. For people who are interested in hearing more podcasts discussing the Manson case and discussing alternatives to the official Helter-Skelter narrative, I want to recommend the Paulcast channel and these two books. And I'll make sure when this goes up, these links will be in the description. Yeah, the Paulcast channel is just another YouTube channel, obviously, where they're currently talking about the Manson case. And this book, of course, has finally just come out, the Manson File, which is written by Nikolas Schreck. And I've got the poster that's behind me here, that's to promote this book, this edition of the book. It's a new edition of the book. And this man has spent like many, many years studying this case, and he has done a lot of research. And this really tells you everything you need to know about this case and why there was such a cover-up. Because this really is just such a bizarre case. This channel, originally, the group that me and Russ started, we were talking about other true crime cases as well. And we intended to talk about all kinds of different true crime cases. But the Charles Manson case is just such a rabbit hole that we never even got around to finishing the videos. series that we were supposed to be doing, because we wanted to do a different video for each of the alternative theories, because the alternative theories because the Helter Skelter narrative is like what the people were convicted on the basis of. And if you actually just look at the actual crime scene photos and the crime scene reports from the Cielo Drive murders, it's actually quite clear that they lied about how these murders happened. There's clear evidence that Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring were outside the house at some point and were stabbed outside. Yet in the official narrative, we're told they were killed in the living room. They never left the living room, sort of thing. So there's just a lot about this case that, is off. And the most plausible, like, real motive that has been suggested is that there was a drug deal that had gone wrong between, members of Charles Manson's group and the people that lived at Cielo Drive, and that is actually the true motive as to why they went up there. And so, like, we did one show presenting that theory, which is called Drug Burn Theory, and the other alternative theory is to save a brother, which is that in order to free Bobby Beausoleil, because Bobby Beausoleil was already in jail for murdering Gary Hinman. And so the other theory is they went out and did these other crimes in order to make it look like there was another killer. The killer was still on the loose, so Bobby was innocent, basically. And so that's the other theory, the alternative motive as to why they did it. And then you get the wackier ones, like the other alternative theory is that the CIA actually planned all this, and it was done to bring down the counterculture of the 60s or whatever, and so we were going to do videos discussing all of these things. But Russ was just difficult to work with, and so it never sort of came to fruition. But I've done this stream because I have fond memories of him as well. Though he was difficult to work with, I have fond memories of him as well. And I'm hoping that some people who used to come to the original streams will show up and we can remember, the funnier times and the better times. But yeah, he was quite difficult to work with, and he wouldn't do any research himself. He expected me to do all the research. I know what he wanted in his head. He wanted to be like the presenter of a true crime show and have researchers run around after him and not do any work and just take the credit. And he was expecting me to do that for him, And this is just a hobby for me, really. Do you know what I mean? When no one's making any money off of this, really, are they, or whatever, And so it just got ridiculous in the end. And also just other things about the way he behaved were just problematic. But he did have a lot of health problems. He wasn't well. He had a kidney transplant, so he'd already had renal failure. And I think he'd actually had a heart transplant. I'm not sure if it was a transplant or a heart bypass that he had. But people who remember the live streams we used to do that were just in the old group will probably remember he used to, some nights he would show you a handful of pills. He would show you all the pills he had to take, and he would then swallow it with wine. And it was but all those pills that he could, like, I used to talk to him privately, and he explained to me what each of those pills was for, and they were because they would stop his body rejecting his transplanted organs and that sort of thing. He wasn't a well man. He was quite ill, and so it's not surprising that he eventually, and I'd actually stopped talking to him. I'm glad that he I did start talking to him again just a couple of weeks before he died. And it was sad, but yeah, so I'm glad I did finally talk to him again. Oh, sorry, here's my cat. He's coming in. Oh, and the other book I was going to promote as well. Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to remember my plan. This was Neil Sanders' book, Now the Only Thing That's Real. Like I say, both these books I'll post the links to, and this is just for people that are they're interested in discussing, or learning more about alternative explanations for what happened with the Charles Manson case. This book's good, and you buy it directly from the publisher's website. You won't find either of these books on Amazon, sort of thing. But yeah, I'll share the links to that. And Neil Sanders. And if you look at the Poolcast channel, Neil Sanders has been interviewed on the Poolcast channel, and so has Nikolas. There's a really recent interview with Nikolas on the Poolcast channel. And Nikolas is doing another event in England that I'm going to next week. where he's going to be screening the movie Charles Manson Superstar that he made in the 80s about the Charles Manson case, and it contains a prison interview with Charles Manson. And if you're interested in watching interviews with Charles Manson, I think this is probably one of the best ones you'll see, where he's not being goaded into acting crazy and that, where you're just literally seeing Charles Manson as he naturally was. I think it's probably one of the best interviews to watch in that respect. And at this event that's happening in London is because there's also going to be a UK edition of the book published. There you go. But it's just going to have a different cover, though. Apparently the content of the book is no different. And then after that, the day after that as well, we're going to go to a house that Bruce Davis apparently stayed in. People who studied the case would have heard of Bruce Davis, was one of the Manson family, and he is in prison for murdering oh God, who the hell did Bruce Davis murder? But no, he wasn't involved in the LaBiancas or Cielo Drive or Gary Hinman or Benny Crow or any of the other ones. But he is a murderer, and there's loads of conspiracy theories about Bruce Davis. There was a conspiracy theory for ages that Bruce Davis and Tex Watson were the Zodiac. And that's been debunked now because they finally managed to work out who the Zodiac really was. And no, it wasn't Bruce Davis or Tex Watson, sort of thing. But there are lots of other murders that have been like linked to the Manson family. And a few of them legitimately do look like they might have been Bruce Davis. So I think there is something to that. But there's a British link to that. This is why Nikolas is going to take us to this house. It's a British link to the case. Because I don't want to spoil what it says in the book. So yeah, by telling you too much about why. But this is all going to be this is going to be filmed for a documentary as well. So they might even film us going to the Bruce Davis house. That'd be interesting. But this is it's a ruin now, and they're going to knock it down soon. That's why we're going before they knock it down. And it was a house that was owned by Scientologists at the time, and Bruce Davis when he came to England. Because you will also know about Joel Pugh. People who studied this case will have heard of Joel Pugh, who died at the Talgoth Hotel in London. And he had been married to Sandy from the Manson family. And people have speculated that Bruce Davis murdered Joel Pugh while he was in England. But this seems unlikely, actually. If you really look at the Joel Pugh case, it does look like, unfortunately, that poor man did just kill himself. And no, Bruce Davis didn't do it, but... So it's a sad case, and yeah, I'm sure the fact he was married to Sandy can't have helped his mental health here, but or whatever. But that's his only real connection to the case, and it's unlikely that Bruce Davis actually did kill Joel Pugh. But he was in England, and we're going to go to the house where Bruce Davis stayed when he was in England. So that will be interesting, and there's going to be a documentary about that eventually. So, am I seeing everything that's being said in the chat? Just let me check. No, yeah. But yeah, if anyone wants to say anything, please do. I would like to see who's here. I was hoping Sam would show up, because Sam was always at our old streams. I've done this stream more for just the people who remember the streams that we used to have with Russ. So I'm sure some people would want to remember him, I hope. Or maybe not. Oh, the other thing as well, this dress. I wore it because it's black, so to be in mourning. But Russ hated this dress. Russ didn't like this dress. He said it made me look like Morticia Adams. And he didn't like Morticia Adams. So I was like, oh. So, fuck you, Russ. I'm wearing the dress. Don't tell me you hate my dress, because I'll wear it to your funeral. Just to spite you. Oh, Norm. Hello there. Oh, I know. Of course, I know Norm. Yes, Norm, yes. At least Norm is here. Yeah, but I've mainly done this just so we can share our memories of Russ, but I didn't want to sugarcoat it. That's why I read out that statement. So I have told you, yes, he was difficult to work with, but he was also a good friend to me during the lockdown at some points as well. He had his faults, and he was difficult to work with, and I stopped working with him in the end. I didn't actually speak to him for about a year, and it is strange that I just started talking to him again about 3 weeks ago, and I've just recently been talking to him again. And then I've suddenly heard, that he died suddenly. It's sad. Sam's here. Oh, hello, Sam. Yes, no, yeah, I wanted you to come to this, yeah, because you remember the old streams, don't you? I'm sure, yeah, the rest of us would want to get together and remember him because he was funny sometimes. When he was on, it was funny. If it worked, if it went well, he could hold an audience, and that he was funny. But the problem I had with him, Beckham, hello, yes, God, yeah, I'm just talking about how difficult Russ was to work with. And yeah, how I replaced him with you in the end, didn't I? You ended up in the videos. And if you are going to watch the videos on this channel, the later ones where it's just me and Mike and Beckham are probably the better ones. I think the best one we ever did, the one I'm proudest of, is probably the one that is called Drug Burn Theory Part 2. That's the one where I show the how old was Russ when he died? I think he was early 60s. I'm not sure of his exact age. I know he was like in his late 50s. Yeah, I think he was about 61 or so. I don't know. He was not well anyway. He did sound like because like I said, if you watch those streams that he just did to the group, he didn't do this on any of the streams that are on YouTube. But he would sit in his room and he would hold out his hand like that and show you a handful of pills, and then he'd knock it back with wine, and that was his pills because he'd had multiple organ transplants. He was a really ill man, and he shouldn't have been drinking that wine and knocking those pills back with wine. This is why he wasn't well. But yeah, he wouldn't take advice. That was the other thing as well. He wouldn't take advice off anyone. I would used to try and direct him and try to get him to tone down his misogynistic, sexist humor. Yeah, he did. He did a lot of streams driving around, didn't he? Because that was actually his career. That wasn't just his hobby. He had a job. He really had a job doing that. He owned about 4 vintage limos, and those suits he wore. He was obviously into the like 40s gangster, American gangster image, wasn't he? That was what he was dressed up as, and that was what he was doing. But yeah, he did a concierge service, which is like a chauffeur that talks to you and gives you a guided tour, isn't it? And so yeah, he used to do streams from his channel where he was just driving around New York. I remember he did ones when the Christmas lights were on. Those were interesting to watch. And yeah, I regret actually because I wanted to travel to New York because I wanted to see the Dakota building, and because he'd been doing the limo tours for so long, he actually knew the doorman of the Dakota building, and he would have let us in apparently, and so I could have gone up to because there's one landing that they actually used in Rosemary's Baby, because not much of Rosemary's Baby was actually filmed in the Dakota building. Weirdly enough, I think it's just the one of the corridors is used, and I think an elevator is used, and obviously the front of the building is used for the bit where the woman jumps off and that. But actually, not much of it was really filmed in the Dakota building. But if I had gone on this limo thing with, I'm getting a white stripe showing up on my face for some reason. Sorry, yeah, I could have gone. Yeah, basically, I would have been able to go into the building and look at the landing where they shot Rosemary's Baby. Yes, he had kids. He had, I think, 3 sons. Sorry if I've got the number wrong, if there was actually more than 3. But yeah, I think he had 3 sons, yeah. Yeah, Rosemary's Baby. That's weirdly sort of linked to the Manson case, isn't it? Just through Roman Polanski. Mm. Yeah, oh, thanks, Josh. Yeah, it was sad. But like, if you go back and watch the replay of this, I talk about what he was like, and yeah, there were grievances with him. But it's like, I wanted to come and pay tribute to him anyway because his streams were good. He had some sort of talent, but he couldn't be directed. He didn't want to work with other people. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, no, he just how to put it into words, yeah, but just the way he was difficult to work with. He expected me to. I was actually the one doing all the research. If you watch those streams as well, it's me that's sharing all the documents. He's not doing any of that. And I tried to get him into the production side of it. Like I would try to get him into using Streamlabs, OBS, and stuff like that. But he wasn't interested in anything. He expected me to literally do everything, and then sit and take all the credit for it, sort of thing. So that's what he was like. But he used to make me laugh as well. Just oh. Because it was just a hobby, do you know what I mean? It's not like it was costing me anything, really. It was just a hobby. But yeah, it was quite insulting though, that he just But I know what he wanted to be in his head. He thought he was like the presenter of Unsolved Mysteries or something, you know, and we was all his servants running around doing the research for him, and yeah. Oh, in his brain, that's what he thought he was. Yeah. But the things he used to say, oh, I just wanted to recall. I was just thinking, as I was thinking about him, I was recalling the funny things he said. And when we were talking about the true motives of the case, obviously, just the way he worded things was funny. He had a way, his way with words. And he said to me, "Oh, the real reason they did this was they needed money, and none of them wanted to get a job, right? So they went and they robbed the people at Cielo Drive." You can't argue with that, really, though. No, the way he put it, that is a way of putting it. That is. They needed money. No one wanted to get a job, right? So they just went and robbed those people. Stuff like that. This is why I liked working with him and why I did do the shows with him, even though he was difficult to work with. Yeah. Yeah. Two of his kids were, quite young. He had an older teenage one, though. I think. Yeah. I don't want to talk too much about his about his kids, but yeah, I know they are not that young, but they are still too young to lose their dad. It's sad. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I don't think what to say. Yeah, but the main things that I wanted to come online for and record so people can watch on playback is to say if you're really interested in the Charles Manson case and just looking at alternative theories, and if you question the Helter Skelter narrative, which most people bloody would, it sounds quite ridiculous, doesn't it? I recommend getting this book, and I'll make sure the links to that are in the description. And this book. And this is by Neil Sanders, and the other one's by Nikolas Schreck. And you can't find them on Amazon. You have to buy them from the author's website. And I'll make sure that there's a link in the description. And I also recommend the podcast channel to anyone that is not subscribed to the podcast channel. If you're interested in the Charles Manson case, then yes, they are talking about it. And they have new documents all the time. Right, those of us that are following what documents are coming up online, right? There's always constantly new documents that are showing how involved the Manson family were with all sorts of other crime, and it's just an insane rabbit hole. It really is. If you're into like weird rabbit holes of craziness, this case never stops giving. It is just mad. And that's sort of what they're talking about now. And I say, Sam, basically cardiac arrest was what I heard, and that pretty much means massive heart attack. You just drop dead instantly. Hopefully, you didn't know too much about it. Yeah. And I know he used to stress himself out a lot. So I used to, as well as doing the live streams with him, I'd talk to him like privately. We'd have like video calls. And when he was really stressed out about stuff, he would work himself up. He was a drama queen. Do you know what I mean? He'd get really, really irate. And you could hear him like breathing faster now, which is a bad sign if someone's got heart problems, And so I'd be trying to calm him down and that. So I just hope that when he actually died, he wasn't really stressed out over something and suddenly went, I just hope that it's happened suddenly and he didn't know what was happening. Yeah. When he was found, so he was on his own when it happened, presumably. I heard he was discovered after having had a... Yeah. Yeah, I just hope that it was quick. He didn't know much about it when it actually happened, yeah. Bless him. But I know he wasn't well. I think he had a heart transplant, actually, he told me. It wasn't even just a heart bypass. He had a heart transplant and he had a kidney transplant. And if you watch the old streams and you saw his pills, half those pills would have stopped him rejecting his organs. And he also took sleeping pills and anxiety pills at night that he shouldn't have drunk with. So that's another reason why his sense of humour got a bit strange. And that's the other thing, that I want to address about Russ as well, because people will talk about this, right? He had a really old-fashioned sense of humour. He had a sense of humour like someone from the 1950s, like I Love Lucy, that sort of thing, like when in comedy shows men slap the woman around the face, and the studio audience went, domestic abuse, isn't that hilarious? That's the sort of era that Russ's sense of humour came from. He didn't understand well, he did understand. That's the worst thing, you know. I mean, he knew why that sort of humor didn't fly no more, but he wanted to still make jokes like that, and you just couldn't convince him otherwise. You couldn't get him to tone it down. I couldn't. It's hard to put into words. No one's brought it up anyway. But I just wanted to address that as well. Why did I work with a man who spoke like that, and spoke to me like that, and all that sort of thing? It's because I understood he just had a very dated sense of humor, and couldn't let it go, basically, you know. And he didn't have the comedic skill to work it, to make it work in this day and age, because it's very, very hard. You can actually get away with making those sorts of jokes in this day and age, but the man has to make himself look like a dick for saying it. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to explain, but no, the way these things work. And he couldn't do it. He didn't deliver it right. He just looked like an arsehole when he did it, and it made him difficult to work with. And those streams, they looked weird and disjointed, the ones with him, and that's because I had to edit out large parts of it where he had gone off and done some weird joke or whatever. And or he also used to sometimes suddenly start talking about, I think, where we were drinking. He would actually forget that we weren't just on a video chat, we were doing a live stream, and he would suddenly start talking about his personal situation, and we'd sort of be saying like, Mike, Russ, we're live, you shouldn't be talking about this. And so there's bits that I had to edit out. There's big chunks of it that are edited out. That's why it looks weird and disjointed at some points. So yeah, these are the reasons he was difficult to work with. Yeah, the Odd Couple TV series. In fact, the one bit that we ever did that actually worked and that I was able to leave in, because the whole point of the show was, right, the vision that we had, and it never worked out. You never actually saw it work out. Everyone's really critical in the comments. Like, oh, this is a load of shit. You know what I mean? We actually never got it worked out. But the point was supposed to be, we was going to all be wearing vintage clothes, and we was going to have a drink, and we was going to do a warm-up bit where we talked, and we tried to do some kind of skit. And then we would go into talking about the true crime, because when you're doing live streams, you're waiting for the audience to show up. So that we were going to try and do a warm-up bit, and then we were going to go into the thing. But Russ was impossible to direct. It was really difficult to plan anything with him. But the one time it actually worked, I think it's actually the Drug Burn Theory Part 1. As we're starting, me and Mike and him, and we improvised it as well. We didn't even really plan it, but we all start talking to each other like we're in the same house. And the people in the audience were reacting to it as well. They found it funny. We were talking like we all lived in the same. And it's hard to explain. You have to see it. But it was the only time it ever worked, and I didn't have to edit out the comedy that Russ tried to do. Bless him. But yeah, it actually worked, and it was funny. And I'm glad that we caught that, because it shows you, he did have some kind of talent, and it was funny. When he was on, it was funny, but it was hard to direct him. It was hard to get him to do what you wanted him to do, and he would just make himself look bad. He didn't know how to do it and not make himself look absolute. It's hard to put into words. You had to see it. But yeah, when Mike says, why he never joined you on the MSDP? Well, he wasn't popular. He people. Because he used to go in. He had extreme opinions. He used to have a go at other people. He was sexist. He was sexist to women. You know what I mean? And it's just people just didn't like him. This is why he was never asked to be on the Manson, the podcast channel and that sort of thing. It's just because he wasn't popular, and it's sad. And a lot of what he had to say as well was just based off. He was reacting to my research for a lot of it. The only video that we did where he actually had his own stuff prepared that had nothing to do with me was the videos where we were talking about the trial, and those are quite good videos. I think he did make good points. He had good points. They are worth watching if you're interested in this case. And their trial was a really weird, bizarre spectacle, and they weren't given a fair trial. And I know a lot of people don't give a shit because they are murderers, so it's like, oh, who cares, you know what I mean? But no, actually, everyone deserves a fair trial, and these people did not get a fair trial. and and that doesn't really do justice to the victims as well, does it? If the basis their killers were convicted of was a load of bullshit, wasn't really the truth, then that isn't truly justice for the victims, is it? At least the right people went down. But if what they was convicted of was a load of nonsense, then you've not really done right by anyone, have you? You know, it's sad. Oh, there's just seeing these in the chat. What do others think? Oh, Sam as well. This is something. Yeah, but over the time, there's questions people have asked me, and I've never done another stream on this channel to answer them, have I? But Sam, you ages ago, I remember you were asking me, did they test? Because when I talk about the autopsy reports, I talk about the toxicology reports of all the victims, and you asked me once in the past, did they test for LSD? And I said, I don't know. That's weird. Yeah, I don't know. I'll look into that. And I was able to find out, like, basically, no, they can't test for LSD because LSD is a microdose, right? When you take a dose of LSD, it's literally like a fraction of a milligram of the drug. So it doesn't actually show up in your blood, and it wouldn't show up. And what they were testing in those autopsy reports, what you see is the results of their urine toxicology. So yeah. So no, it wouldn't show up. They can't have tested for LSD because you couldn't test for LSD because it's such a microdose. It just wouldn't show up. It wouldn't show up in the urine or the blood or anything. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'll share that. Yeah. Oh no, sorry, wrong one. I never found him to be difficult. Yeah, some web spaces ban him too fast. I think people did sometimes overreact to him. But yeah, when you're trying to run a true crime group, but he was a drama queen. He used to come in and he used to like to start arguments. I can understand why people didn't like him and why people did ban him from their groups and that. So I'm not going to but I do sort of agree with you. Yeah, I think some people did overreact to him. The MSDP chat room. This is because, right, when I first started all this Charles Manson discussion, I used to work night shifts, right? So I was always awake in the middle of the night, sort of thing. And because of time zones, I was always around for these sorts of things. But yeah, I'm just rarely awake at the time the podcasts are going. So I don't work night shifts anymore. I work a day job now. So yeah, I'm just not awake. But sometimes I am at the podcast streams, and I am in the chat. But it's just rare because of the time they go live. And I sat up late tonight to do this so that American people could come and see it. Because I know most of the audience is American. There's very few English people that would even know who he was. So why would I do a stream for him? Anyhow, oh, for those who haven't seen the bottle as well, people find this funny enough. The wine is called 19 Crimes. I'll just explain it again. Sorry if you were here when I did before, but all these pictures on the bottles are of people that were being punished by deportation. Because I think it was late Victorian times, they punished people by sending them to Australia. And they actually colonised Australia and did really well out of it. So the last laugh was on us. But yeah, the reason I bought wine tonight was because you see Russ drinking wine when he was doing his streams. But yeah, I've actually been on the podcast once, only briefly. I can remember once, and I don't think it was actually the main stream, like because they do their main stream and then they go on an hour like afterwards and they do an after show stream. And I think I appeared on that. But no, I would like to talk to them because I would like to do a stream. Just because they're a better channel and it looks better. I would like to do some kind of thing where we talk about the blood evidence again. But actually on a better channel. I'll have to talk to them. We all know each other on that. I'm sure we can. But maybe, yeah, I would like to do some kind of thing with the podcast. And obviously, I could get an interview with Nikolas Schreck on this channel and that. But this channel's so small, it really isn't worth it. You know what I mean? But yeah, would people be interested in that? Would people want to see an interview with Nikolas Schreck? do my audience care that much? But they should do, yeah, if you're listening to me, because the whole reason that I even got into this case is because of Nikolas Schreck's research into it. You know. Oh. Right, how long have we been going now? I think we've probably been going long enough. I don't know. Has anyone else got anything to say? I'll keep going a bit longer, just in case anyone else shows up. What to talk about, though? This is the problem with having no guest on. I have to fill the air. Well, I'm just going to make a cigarette. Sorry to smoke, but, you know, it's my stream. What are you going to do? Oh, and yeah, I could show you the poster in that, actually, yeah, because that's quite funny. And is anyone interested in the event I went to? Oh, that was a strange day when I went to pick up my copy of the Manson file. Because, yeah, if you've been waiting for your copy of the Manson file, you know, we ordered it like about 2 years ago. Well, it was before COVID, basically. And when COVID happened, that delayed everything. So we've all been waiting for literally years for that book to be released. And I could have waited for it to get posted to me. But the author was actually coming to London and was going to do a book signing at an event. And so I actually paid to travel to London to pick up my copy. And it's signed by the author as well. I think it is. Oh. It's a heavy book. There you go. Oh yeah, and just to give you an idea, look at the size of the print. Right, this is a hard book to read. Right, look. It's a lot of hard work, but it's worth it. It's worth it, and it tells you everything, because the reason why there was such an extreme cover-up in this case as well was to protect people's reputations, because Charles Manson really legitimately was a musician and really did know a lot of famous people, and a lot of famous people had him in their houses and entertained him and everything. And what appears to have happened is basically when the Bernard Crowe shooting happened, suddenly that made everyone go, oh my God, and turn against Charles Manson, obviously, because he had just shot someone, you know what I mean? So, but apparently Charles, even though his erratic behavior was making people a bit scared of him, people were tolerating him, and Terry Melcher was about to record him. They had a family jams album planned. They had already taken the photographs for the cover and all this sort of stuff. But then the Bernard Crowe shooting happens, and that's when everyone suddenly turned against him. And so, yeah, but it's hard to get people to even bloody believe this. But honestly, you get this book, and Nikolas Schreck has spent years putting together all the information. And it can be proven. It can be proven. It will blow your mind. But yeah, he knew so many famous people. And once you understand how embarrassing it was to a lot of very rich, famous, powerful people that this happened with Charles Manson, you can see why there was such an elaborate cover-up. And yeah, so it is all worth knowing. Oh, hi everyone. Sorry, yeah, I'm trying to respond to the chat. And if you go back and watch this from the beginning, you'll see the written statement I read out. Yeah, I would order Shrek's book, but I don't want to wait 8 months for it. Apparently now, if you order it, if it's not a signed copy, it will just get shipped out pretty quickly. I think you will receive it, and people are receiving them. It's only because we all pre-ordered like 2 years ago, and apparently the poor dude's got he has to do like a 9 to 5 job. There's been so many signed copies ordered, he literally has to sit there between 9 and 5, literally just signing books and getting them shipped out. That's why it's taking so long. It's people who ordered signed copies. But if you just order a copy now, then it just gets shipped out, so you should better get it. It wouldn't have even been republished. No, it probably would. It would have stopped him. And there's the other interesting thing is, for people who've been studying this case for a long time, the old edition, what is the second edition officially, because the first edition is actually Adam Parfrey's scrapbook, isn't it? And Nikolas Schreck just put his name on it. But then Nikolas wrote his actual Manson file, and he actually added a lot more content to it. And this new edition corrects things that he got wrong and gives you new information, basically. So even if you've read the old one, you need to get this one because he corrects something that he got wrong. Because Charles Manson was still alive when the old version came out, and so Charles Manson got to read it, and Charles Manson told Nikolas, "No, change this. You got that wrong." And there's a couple of other things that he corrects apparently that are different to the second edition that you may have read before. And he gives you new information. And yeah, it's definitely worth getting if you're interested in this case. Then yeah, that's definitely probably the only book that's really, really you need to buy. You know what I mean? Because there's many other books, and if you've got time to sit and read a million books, there are a million books that are probably worth reading. But there's a lot of books that are just peddling the same nonsense, the Helter Skelter thing, everything Ed Sanders wrote, The Family and all that. Lots of books that are sort of thought of as more reliable than Helter Skelter actually aren't. They're just telling you the same narrative. And yeah, the only two books that I recommend you get if you're interested in looking at the other narratives is the Manson File and Neil Sanders' book. Both of them, have have information looking at. And Neil Sanders' book is not as much of a work of literature as such as the Manson File. If you know what I mean. Neil Sanders' book is literally just a compilation of all the research he did into the case, and he talks about things that probably, because there's so many, it's so hard to put into words in a stream like this, but there's so much nonsense about this case that is not even worth your time looking at. And he in his book, in this one, he goes into some of the stuff that probably isn't worth looking at, but it is because it's worth considering who was putting that information out there, why. Because all the bizarre theories that aren't really relevant were put out by someone to distract us from looking at the real truth, if you understand what I mean. Sorry, yeah, I know that was a bizarre way to make the point, but yeah. Do you know what I mean? If even the bullshit theories were made by someone, for some reason, someone did that, and in a lot of cases, it literally was probably just to sell a book. It's just someone wanted to sell a book. And there's evidence that Scientologists actually didn't want to be associated with the Charles Manson case because he actually met a Scientologist and did have some mild link to Scientology. Charles Manson actually did. And they were so freaked out by that. This is why Charles Manson is linked so much to the Process Church. Because if you look at who the Process Church actually were, the Process Church actually started in London, and the people that founded it were former Scientologists. So, like, Scientologists have propagated this theory that Charles Manson was to do with the Process Church to distract from the fact he actually did know a Scientologist, if you get what I mean. It's hard to explain. You need to get these books and read it, so you can understand, because there's so much to read about this case, and a lot of it is not really worth your time because it's just a distraction. It's all part of the cover-up. It was just another thing to distract you from what the real truth was. It's just an endless rabbit hole case. It really is. And so, if you're really, really into strange cases, because for a solved case as well, because it is a solved case, we know exactly who did it. It's just why they did it that is unclear. You know what I mean? And also, why was this case so strange that they went to this much trouble to cover up the real motive? These are the questions that are important. So it's not even just about the case, about the murders and how horrible, and the murders were horrible, and no one's trying to play that down or distract from, how horrible the murders were. But if you're not being told the true reason why it happened, then you're not really doing these people justice, are you? You haven't done these people justice. That's the sentient point that we have to make. Sorry. Yeah. He fucking was, mate. Yes, you're right. Yeah. L. Ron Hubbard was living in England in 1963, same time the process of charges. Yeah. The process was started. Yeah. And the process church, the two, I think it was two guys and a woman actually started the process church, and they were former Scientologists. They were breakaway Scientologists. Right. And so Scientologists hate the process church and want to disparage the process church. And so they fucking try and pin the process church to Charles Manson. That's why there's all these weird books telling you that it was somehow to do with the process church, and because there's a whole book dedicated to this conspiracy theory that the process church was deliberately programming serial killers, creating serial killers, and the guy's called Maori. Oh God, yeah, no, but the book it's worth reading just to see the bullshit sort of thing, but not really worth reading. But it's one of the cases he says is the process church created them was the Manson family, obviously, and the Zodiac, and there's a few other serial killers that he claims is actually made by the process church, and it's actually no. I think he's way off. He's way off. But he does in the bit about the Charles Manson stuff. He does uncover stuff about Abigail Folger knowing Charles Manson previously, whilst they still lived in Haight Ashbury. Sorry, because there's a whole time that Charles Manson was in Haight Ashbury when they had the black bus. And Abigail Folger, who's one of the victims at CLA Drive, the lady whose face was so horribly cut, and she was Wojtek Fikowski's girlfriend. And she apparently worked at the Haight Ashbury Clinic. Her and her mother both worked at the Haight Ashbury Clinic. And so there's good reason to think that they would have at least seen the girls or met the girls at some point. They vaguely knew each other. And in that Maori, whatever it is, where he's going on about, oh, it's the process church did it all, that shit. But no, he's wrong about that. But he makes a good point about Abigail Folger knowing them beforehand. You know, it's a very weird, convoluted stuff. But there's loads of connections between these people, because when you read the Helter Skelter narrative, you're told that the Manson family ran into the Hollywood Hills and went to random houses and randomly killed people. But at the same time as it was random, they're also supposed to have known that this was Terry Melcher's house, and it's to do with the Beach Boys as well. So Bugliosi trips himself up a million times in the narrative, right? But they're supposed to have randomly gone to this house, CLA Drive, even though this house was previously lived in by Terry Melcher, who managed the Beach Boys. And if you look into the history of all this stuff, the Beach Boys kind of screwed over Charles Manson by using a song of his and changing the lyrics and not paying him properly. And this is why you need to get the Manson file and you need to read all this. But so like he tries to tell you that they did it randomly, but also they targeted CLA Drive because it was Terry Melcher's house. And then they targeted the LaBiancas randomly as well. But if you look into it, you find they actually lived in the house next door to the LaBiancas' house. When they had their black bus, they had their black bus parked in the drive next to the LaBiancas, so they did know the LaBiancas. And also, Charles Watson lived in the guest house at CLA Drive for a while. That's the other crazy fact about this. Right? So Charles Watson is supposed to have randomly targeted this house that he didn't know, but you look into it, and Charles Watson actually freaking lived in the guest house at CLA Drive. He knew CLA Drive very well. And, you know, these are the things you need to look at. And what they are misleading you about when you read the Helter Skelter narrative. You know, there's so much to know about this case. I never made my cigarette, did I? Sorry, I'm just trying to keep it going for as long as I can in case anyone shows up that has anything to say about it. But yeah, the sentient points I wanted to make was just, sorry this channel was a mess. Sorry our podcasts were a mess. Russ was difficult to work with. This was never the finished project anyway. But we had some good times. We had some good times in our little streams. And, I hope that people will remember the good times, not the bad times. Sorry. I left something on the other side of the room. I'll be back in a second. No, I haven't. There it is. Found it. Ooh. Oh, and I could, I'll get the poster down in a minute. I'll try and show you the poster. Tell you some of my stories about the day. Yeah, oh, thank you, Mike. I'll put that on the screen. You put in the work for our streams. I did. I really did. That's what I would say. But I didn't come on here just to bash him. I did want to pay tribute to him as well. But yeah, no. But the truth was, you know what I mean. That's what's so funny about it. And as you look at these streams, don't judge him harshly for it, because it was funny. In his mind, he was the bloody guy presenting Unsolved Mysteries, and I was his assistant or whatever. Bless him. It was funny. It was funny. No one. It didn't cost me nothing. We were all in lockdown anyway. What else could I have been doing? You know what I mean? It was a bit insulting that he expected me to do all the work and then still said sexist stuff to me and treated me like I was, Oh, bless him. He wasn't a bad man, and he was a good friend to me at some points as well. And if you go and look at his Facebook profile, the one that's called Russ Figaredo Limo Stories, there's another woman posted on the timeline that he was a good friend of hers, and she shares some screenshots of messages he sent her, obviously when she was going through a difficult time. And he sends her kind messages, nice, kind words. And I remember that about him as well. Also, I want people to remember that. He was a good person. He was a kind person as well. And he didn't genuinely hate women. He wasn't really a misogynist. He just had a fucking dated and sexist view. But he didn't really, in his heart of hearts, hate women. Bless him. And it was a laugh. It was a laugh working with him. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. And I didn't work with him for that long. I did sack him. I got Beckham in tonight. But no, he was nice. There was the heartwarming moments working with him as well. And he was a good friend to me privately. And I did get tearful earlier. Because Delinda Haynes, and it was really nice of Delinda Haynes to do this, because I won't talk about exactly what he said to her, but Russ did send Delinda Haynes an inappropriate Facebook message one night, and it was quite unpleasant what he said to her. And but she's still on her channel, has posted RIP Russ Figaredo, and it was actually quite moving. The video is just a picture of Russ, and she posted the song Walk On. And it sounds like Elvis singing it, or someone trying to sound like Elvis. But it was just a really fitting song, and it was quite sweet and moving. And that just shows how you can show forgiveness when someone has passed away. Show forgiveness, you know what I mean? And she did that, and she says, "Rest in peace." Good for her. Oh, bless him. Yeah, he wasn't a bad man. He was funny. We had our moments, didn't we? Oh yeah. Oh, wait a sec. Sorry, let me respond to the chat. I was making my roll up. So it was Dean Morehouse. The text lived with Dean Morehouse in the thing. Yeah, it wasn't while Dean Morehouse was there, because the thing you got to know about Tex is Dean Morehouse lived at Dennis Wilson's house. Right. This is how Charlie met Dean Morehouse, and Tex lived at Dennis Wilson's house before Charlie did. So Tex knew Dean Morehouse before he knew Charlie. We're told so much bullshit about what actually happened and how they all really met and everything. But no, Tex was at Dennis Wilson's house before Charlie arrived. And Dean Morehouse was at Dennis Wilson's house before Charlie arrived. And then, and it would be while Melcher was still living in the main house, presumably, wouldn't it? But Dean Morehouse and Charles Watson, Tex, were living in the guest house. So this is like another reason why, because when you look at the crimes as they were committed at Cielo Drive, it's kind of you wonder how they knew the garden so well in the dark to be chasing these people around the garden and that. It's all quite odd. But no, if you realise that Tex actually lived there, and there's also evidence that the other girls had been there. There were parties there. Cielo Drive was a party house. Right, so the other girls had been there. They knew the house. These people knew the house that they were robbing. With the sentient points take away. They were not strangers to these people, and that's the big lie that you're told when you listen to the Helter Skelter narrative. But yeah, it's like fucking Schrodinger's situation with Bugliosi though, because he's telling you they ran into the Hollywood Hills and randomly attacked these people, but also this house used to belong to Terry Melcher, and he resents them because he was the Beach Boys, So it's like, well, did they know them or didn't they? You can't get it straight in his own mind. It's ridiculous. And in Charles Watson's book, if you read "Will You Die for Me," he's actually saying, "I didn't know these people. These people were strangers to me," and that's bullshit. He did know them. He did know. You need to read the Manson File. The Manson File. Watch the podcast. Look at Neil Sanders' books. This one as well. Like I say, if you're watching this on playback, I'll make sure there's links in the description. Sorry, now I've lost my lighter. What else people saying? Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, I would never meet you, Mike, would I? I mean, Mike, we talk more about Led Zeppelin and old horror films than we do the Manson case, don't we? That's the thing. Yeah. Like you meet other friends through this case. Yeah. We talk about other things, not just about the case, is it? Yeah, right. Hello, Paul. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for dropping by. Yeah. Let's see. I'll watch this on replay or whatever. Yeah. No, but I just we're really wrapping up now. I just wanted to hang around to see if anyone else from the old crew is going to show up. But yeah, it was mainly for Sam, even that I did this, because he was one of the ones that was there at the time. Oh, because we used to do the old streams with the group in the group. It was funny, and we tried to, and like I say, I tried to get him to be a more seasoned presenter, and I tried to get him to do a podcast and to get him to learn to use Streamlabs and that. But he was just impossible to work with. He wouldn't do anything. He was not interested in the production side of anything. He literally just expected me to do everything. And just give him the link, tell him what to say, and he would say it. But he thought, I've repeatedly said it, but he in his mind, he was the dude presenting Unsolved Mysteries, you know what I mean? And there was this team of researchers behind him. But it wasn't like that, right? We should have been equally all trying our bit to try and do our bit, but he didn't. It was funny. It's like, it didn't really matter. None of us was getting paid. It was all just a hobby. That's why I carried on. And I did sack him. I replaced him with Beckham, didn't I? In the end. Yeah. Oh dear. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, and I do miss him. And I'm so glad that I did start speaking to him again. It's literally in the last 3 weeks I started speaking to him again. I hadn't spoken to him for a year, and yeah, we had some pleasant. Yeah, it's weird. It's just weird how these things happen, isn't it? And I don't think he was ill. Even he wasn't even saying, "Oh, I'm suffering extra health problems" or anything. I think it did just happen suddenly. I hope he wasn't. So I hope he didn't suffer much at the end. I hope it just happened suddenly. Who knows? Who knows? Apparently he was found. No one was with him when it happened. So I don't know. They go, oh no, but this is the thing. Like, there's point to. They wouldn't, would they? Though, because buddy, the ones that are outside, the ones that aren't in prison, have been threatened years ago. Obviously, not to ever tell the truth. And the ones who are in prison can't change their stories now, can they? Because then they're how are they going to get probation if they fucking change their if they admit they lied the whole time in the first place? You know, it's like this is why the girls that aren't changing their story. This is why they don't change their stories. Because it's too late. It's too late in the day now. But I believe, yeah, Squeaky and Sandy and Gypsy and all the rest, the reason they never was adamant about drug ban and all that was because they probably were threatened. You know, there was like, you keep quiet, you don't tell them who you knew, you don't tell anyone anything, or we're going to... Who knows what the hell they threatened them with, because it wasn't just the DA's office, it wasn't just the government, it was the mob as well. The mob and the mafia was involved in all this. So God knows who was threatening them, you know what I mean? I can understand why, even to this day, they don't want to talk about it, you know what I mean? So yeah, I can understand why they don't change their stories. Yes, they were at Cielo when Melcher was there, but never when Tate was living there. Well, that is up for debate, isn't it? It's because you have to remember, whilst they were renting that house, because Tate wasn't always there, was she? Because she was staying in London for a while. But whilst Tate wasn't there and Roman Polanski wasn't there, it was Abigail Folger and Fikowski that had the run of the house. And the house was just known as a party pad. Everyone that rented it, it was a party pad sort of thing, you know. And so Abigail Folger and Fikowski were partying in the house while they had it, and Sharon Tate wasn't there. So who's to say the girls didn't go to a party at that house? Sharon Tate might not have been there. She might have been in London because she was filming 13 Chairs and whatever, wasn't she, in London? Or whatever. But they might have been there. Who knows? Who bloody knows? And this is the stuff people find difficult to believe, is that they actually hung around with people and that. But no, I can bloody believe it. And you read the Manson file, you won't have such trouble believing it either as well, you know. You know, I could see as well how the music industry would turn around and protect itself and freak out. But no, Nicholas, there's stuff that Nicholas points out in the Manson file, like Dennis Wilson, like obviously years later after everything had happened, spoke about how scared he was of Charles Manson and all this stuff. But you look back before the murders happened, there's interviews with Dennis Wilson where he's talking about Charlie and how amazing he is and how he's staying at his house and he's great. And like lots of people thought Charlie was great. Everyone seems to have thought Charlie was great right up until the point that he shot Bernard Crowe, and then they suddenly turn on him. Basically, that's what appears to have happened. No, I don't think. I'm not even going to put it. Well, I'll fucking no. We'll put it on the screen because. No, he's not said that. He's not said that is the whole reason that's why it happened. No, he suggested that it was because Jay Sebring was known to be into bondage, wasn't he? There's loads of accounts of Jay Sebring liking tying up girls and whipping them. And there's loads of all the theories about the sinister pornography. And what people need to understand is this celebrity pornography that Roman Polanski was making was not just normal celebrity sex tapes. It was like weird stuff. It was like top shelf weird pornography, disturbing stuff, you know, with sadism and animals and weird stuff. You know, that's what these rumors are. And so the rumor about is that Sebring may have made some kind of pornography with the Manson girls. And it was sadistic, you know, he tied them up or whatever, but he was too rough with them. And but though that wasn't the reason that he was killed, but this is part of the reason why they staged the crime scene how they did. Because if you look at the blood evidence, it looks like Jay Sebring actually fell down and bled out on the porch. He was dead on the porch. But I don't want to spoil the Manson file. But there's another weird twist with Sebring. Yeah, if you haven't read the Manson file yet. Yeah. But no, Joe Sebring basically was out dead on the porch, and yeah. And no, what Nikolas is saying there about there's a rumor that there's loads of weird rumors about Joe Sebring, and who knows what's true and what's not, because a lot of people wrote accounts of things they'd done with Joe Sebring, but it was after the murders. Like there's an account that he. I won't hold the book up again; it's so heavy, right? But the Manson file, there's an account that Nikolas quotes where it's a woman, an actress that claimed to have been Joe Sebring's lover, and it was when she wrote her biography. And she gives an account of a sexual encounter she had with Joe Sebring. And she talks about how it was weird, how he tied her up and he rubbed her down with these weird oils, these weird smelling oils, and but he didn't only tie her up; he hung the rope over beams and stuff like this. And Nikolas points out, well, you see, this is how when the crime scene was staged, the rope was flung over the beam, and that this was because people knew about Joe Sebring's kinky sex life, so they were trying to stage it to look like something like that. But my contention about that woman's account is, right, this was an actress who was writing a biography, trying to sell her biography, and she had the dubious distinction that she had been Joe Sebring's lover. And so, what did she? I think she probably exaggerated what happened with Joe Sebring. I think maybe he did tie her up, but maybe I bet it was not as weird as because she goes into this account. She says he tied her up, and then he ends up standing over her with a knife and freaking out and starting to cry, and it gets weird. It's like, well, making out Joe Sebring was really bizarre. But no, there's other accounts like the way Sharon Tate talked about it when he tied the implication is that it was like consenting. He only if the girl consented did he tie her hands up, and he only lightly whipped you or whatever, you know. So like this, what this woman says, what he quotes in the Manson file sounds like it was something she wrote after the murders to sell her book, and she probably exaggerated whatever really happened between her and Joe Sebring. Is my opinion of what this woman says in the book. But yeah, just making that wider point because Mike made a point there about no, it was retaliation for rough sex. No, that's that. But Nikolas was never saying that is the true motive. What he's saying is this is probably to do with why they staged the crime scene in the way that they did. It's the tie, and there's also a rumor that but which one of the girls? There's rumors Susan was in pornography. There's rumors. I've also even heard it speculated that Krenwinkel was in one of these films and they humiliated her. And this is why she went so nuts on the night at Zero Drive. Interesting point. I think they learned the script to go mindfuck with Johnny. They'll say exactly the same thing. Right? No, I don't. My thing is there. I think they learned a script. I don't believe they were mind control programmed. I think you're absolutely right. I think they learned a script. They all learned the same script, right? Because there's a point in the trial that everyone bloody shows, and someone's done an edited down version of it that makes it look like it happened even more in sync than it really did. But if you watch the actual footage, it didn't happen that in sync anyway. But someone's re-edited it. There's a bit where Charles Manson's in court and he stands up and he says something dramatic, and you see Susan Atkins, and she's parroting him exactly. She says exactly what he is saying. And everyone goes, oh, look at this as evidence that he mind controlled her. He had her under his mind control, right? But when I see that, I say, no, that's not evidence he had her under mind control. That's evidence they knew the same script. That's evidence that she knew exactly what Charles Manson was about to say. And she was pissed off with it for some reason. So she was mocking it. If you look at the expression on her face, that's what I think is going on there. Right? She's going, but she's parroting what he says because she knows the script is what actually happened there. I don't think that they were mind controlled. Yeah, but just to make a point about that. Yeah, and this is another point about Susan as well. Fucking more stuff was unfairly pinned on Susan than she deserved. And like I say, because the way she was portrayed, when I first looked at this case, I thought, my God, absolute psycho woman, evil burner. Why wasn't she executed and all this sort of stuff? But now you look into Susan Atkins, and honestly, I think she. It's tragic that Linda Kasabian was the one who ended up getting the deal. Because out of the two of those girls, I think Susan Atkins was probably the more innocent one, was probably the one that had less input into why the crimes happened. I think Linda Kasabian is the one that deserved to be in prison her whole life, not Susan Atkins. If you actually look at this case, and people will bloody question that, if you've not looked into this case, but if you look into this case, you'll see what I mean. Well, he doesn't hate her. He doesn't hate her. That's silly though. That's not true. What does he care? Anyway, if she wouldn't give him an interview, what was she going to tell? Anyway, well, she did finally do her book, didn't she? Where she started to admit that it sounds like she's admitting that there was a drug burn going on. She makes this statement about if someone rips you off for drugs, you can't go to the drugs trading standards police. It's like so she did kind of before she died try to admit that something could happen, didn't she? Yeah. I've often wondered, I've often fucking wondered, right? CIA operative, because what that actually means is, did they use her? No, well, the government definitely used her, didn't they? Look at Bugliosi, right? They fucking used her. They did, and if you read the book Helter Skelter, right, it is shocking. I can't believe the things he admitted he did. He went and took her out of jail and drove her back to the crime scene, drove her back to CLO Drive and took her around the house again and got her to point out all these different. It's just the whole thing is just weird as hell. So what? I can't believe that this actually was allowed to happen, man. Why was this allowed to happen? But the idea of was she a CIA operative and what did she do later in her life? Because she went on and you look at her life. Who was the father of that baby she had as well? Just after the case, there's another baby, isn't there? People speculate is that Texas baby. And this is a bloody weird guy. She picked up some hitchhikers and was telling them all that weird shit. This is just mentioned in the Manson file, and the Poolcast have done shows about this. This conversation that Linda Kasabian had, where she talked about being an open hole and all this sort of shit. It is actually quite funny. The podcast show, Danny keeps repeating them all. And at this point as well about Susan as well, another point that he goes into about the Manson file, because where you're mainly interested in Susan and Susan's motive, and probably Susan's motive really was to save her brother. She didn't care about the drug deal. It was nothing to do with her. The drug deal was between Linda and Tex, and Frykowski and Abigail. That was who their beef was with, right? And Susan. All Susan was concerned with was getting a lawyer for Bobby, so Bobby didn't implicate her in the murder of Gary Hinman. So that was the whole motive. So maybe Susan's motive really was save the brother. She didn't care about the drug deal. So there is merit to that. It was a bit of both. It was a combination. The true motive was a combination of save a brother and drug burn, basically. But the CIA, the fact that the idea that the CIA engineered the whole thing is bullshit. No, we shouldn't be looking at that. We shouldn't be giving that theory too much time. Because Nikolas puts it brilliantly. It was in some interview he gave recently, but he puts it brilliantly when he says, if we say that the CIA programmed these people or whatever, then we're taking away their own accountability for their actions. Right? These people did this because they were drug dealing nutters and they was fucking desperate for money. And this is what happens if you hang out in those circles. that's the horrible truth of the matter. Do you know what I mean? This is just, if you live that sort of fucking lifestyle, this sort of shit goes down. You know, that's the moral of this story. The real moral of this story. Don't get involved with these sorts of people. This sort of shit. And you won't fucking die like they did at CLA Drive. Bless them, you know what I mean? And it's tragic. It's tragic. It is tragic, and I feel sorry for the victims. I am not disparaging the victims. No one deserves to go that way. I'm not saying they deserve to go that way because of their lifestyle choices. Well, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I mean. But do you know what I mean? Everyone should be safe in their own home or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, right, the official narrative tells you these people were just innocently sat in their houses going, la 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 la, and these nutters bust in through the window and went, I'm the devil, here to do the devil's business. Killed them. That's not the real reason it all happened. It's not right. And you're not doing justice to anyone if you convicted people on a bunch of lies, you know. At least the right people were convicted and went to prison, but they were convicted on a bunch of lies. And their trials weren't fair. And it doesn't matter what you think of Charles Manson, right? Fucking every human being deserves human rights. He deserved a fair trial, and he didn't get a fair trial. That's I'm the least Charles Manson apologist of everyone, right? I really don't feel that sorry for Charles Manson. The only thing I feel sorry for him about was that he gets the blame for everything, and it wasn't all his fault. He was an accomplice and an accessory to them, and he took part in the LaBiancas, and he took part in Hinman enough to be guilty of murder. But Cielo Drive, he was more of an accessory. But if it's true that he went back and moved the bodies around, if he was really involved with moving the bodies around, that makes him guilty of a whole new load of shit, doesn't it? That's perverting the cause of justice. I don't know what you call these laws in America, but in England, if you went and staged the crime scene to look like something else, that's perverting the cause of justice. That's just interfering with a corpse as well. There's a thing like if you go to a crime scene and move the corpse around, you've interfered with the corpse. You know? He was guilty of everything, you know what I mean? But he didn't deserve to be found, you know, he doesn't deserve to go down in history as the person who was responsible for Sharon Tate being murdered, because he wasn't alone, you know, Sorry, just looking at. Yeah, just to say this. Well, if they were mind controlled, that would of necessity lessen their culpability. Yeah, which is the point I was trying to make. Is if we entertain these theories, the CIA made them do it, right? Then we're taking away their accountability. They did it because they were selfish nutters, you know, basically. Let's see what this is. Yeah. Because this is another theory that I would love to do a whole video about the whole CIA motive, and has it got any merit? And in some ways it does, because it's well, I've always thought that this is very bizarre, that it's when Linda turns up that they suddenly go mega violent, right? Because they weren't that violent before Linda turns up. And people disagree with me on this. They go, oh no, this is just a coincidence or whatever. But I say, no, this is fucking strange. How? They're not going out and robbing and shooting people until Linda turns up. Yeah, so I think Linda was a catalyst for the violence. Does that mean the CIA sent her, though? Not necessarily. That could have just happened organically. You know what I mean? And they didn't choose the victims. The CIA. No, I don't. Yeah, but no, I don't believe. My personal gut feeling on it is that there was something going on. But what they wanted the family to do, what they intended the family to do, was go and start some kind of conflict with the Black Panthers. They were trying to get them to start a conflict with the Black Panthers. That was what was being put into Charlie's head, right? But it went wrong. They didn't take into account that these people had their own lives and they were doing their own drug deals on the side or whatever. And so what ultimately happened when the violence happened, it all went down differently to what they wanted it to happen, if you know what I mean. This is just my gut feeling on the matter, but I really don't think that the CIA did orchestrate this. I think that as soon as it happened, the government jumped on it and used it as a stick to beat the counterculture with and say, oh God, look what this LSD and this pot smoking has done to the children. It's made them go nutty and go and worship this weird man, and he's convinced them to go and kill people. And just the Beatles gave him a psychic message in the White Album, and oh my God. Yes, definitely. Yes, Linda Kasabian's definitely antisocial personality. Like I say, I am shocked that out of all of them, she's the one who walked, right? Because Susan made huge mistakes, but she was advised by her lawyers to make ridiculous mistakes, and she did that grand jury thing where she sat there and said, "I stabbed Sharon Tate and I licked the blood off the knife, and it's a trick." No wonder the world hates her and believes she's a killer, right? But if you look at the evidence, yes, she was there, she witnessed it, and she's callous as hell. I don't believe she should have got out or anything. But no, she probably directly did not really stab Sharon Tate at all, ever. She was just there fucking watching it happen, just watching it. Oh. Linda is the one that I think is the scarier one compared to Susan. If you actually rip it down, right? Because you have to understand Susan lied in court. This was the thing I couldn't get my head around with Susan Atkins. Why I hated her for so long, but now I can finally kind of see what happened with her. Right? She lied because she was scared. She knew she was going to go to prison for life, and she was scared, and she wanted the other women to leave her alone in prison. So she said, I'll fess up to all this heavy shit that I've done, and they'll leave me alone when I'm in prison doing a long time. Because she knew she was going to go to prison for a long time. She was either going to get death or she was going to go to prison for a long time. So I think this is what Susan Atkins did. This is what went on in Susan Atkins' head. And this is why she sat there and said all this shit that she didn't really do. Because she was trying to fucking protect herself later in prison, basically, is why she said all this shit. But I think Linda is the one who's the real psycho, and Linda's the one who orchestrated all this crime and was probably the one who was shouting orders at Tex and telling him where to go and who to kill next and all this. Linda is the really scary one, and that's the shocking thing, is that she's the one that got out and is free now, wherever she is. Maybe she's even watching this now. Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. That's another good point, right? Because now, if you look into the mind control experiments that they were doing at the time, Jolyon West, and in England we had William Sargent, Dr. William Sargent. They really were going around society, fucking grabbing disordered personalities. They were going around prisons. So there is some merit to the claim. Maybe Charles Manson was bloody experimented on when he was at Terminal Island. That's not absolutely something to be discredited totally. But to say that this was all the CIA and there was no other motive, that's also letting people get away with, stuff they knew they were doing, that they weren't brainwashed to do. Yeah, and this gets mentioned in Chaos, doesn't it, as well? There was the wires to his cable TV and his power were cut the night before CIA Drive as well, weren't they? They found, and also when you read the Manson file, the LaBiancas were fearing for their lives, and it wasn't the first time they'd been broken into. They'd been broken into repeatedly, and Lino LaBianca was in gambling debt to the mob, and Rosemary LaBianca was not an innocent middle-class woman. She had been into some dicey stuff in her life and all this sort of stuff. There's much more to this case than people think. It's the alien bug. Sorry, I'm just looking at what. The other thing you have to understand about Texas as well, and this is the other weird thing, since I'm talking to someone who knows about the fucking CIA stuff, right? The one thing that jumps out about me about what happened to Texas, if you read what happened to him and what the psychiatrists are saying about him when they're assessing him for his actual court case, Tex, in about April, so a few months, about 4 months before the crimes happened, took an overdose of what was probably actually Jimson weed. They said it was belladonna, but it's a moot point because it's the same plant family. And so when he's taken this overdose of Jimson weed and gone walking into town with a tire on his shoulder and ended up getting arrested, crawling around on the floor going beep beep, and everyone laughs about it. What actually happened to him then was he'd taken an overdose of nightshade, deadly nightshade, and that actually causes a form of brain damage. It leaves you in a semi-comatose state, right? And that is what had happened to him. And had the police done their fucking jobs, right, and got a doctor to look at him when he was in that state, he would have probably been put into a hospital and then sent back home to his mother. Do you know what I mean? But the police just threw him in a cell and left him in that state and then let him go, and he goes back to the family. And he's at this point sort of brain damaged, right? He's literally is brain damaged. And so from that state, from that time onwards, he was in a messed up mental state, obviously, and he already had been taking tons of drugs. I actually want to write a whole book about Charles Watson. I want to write the Manson file, but about Charles Watson, right? This guy's life is crazy, right? But he was brain damaged by belladonna. But the reason my point about the CIA thing is, if you look into the drugs they were using to try and mind control people to get more violent, a drug they were using was something called scopolamine. And scopolamine was derived from belladonna, right? And they were also looking into the effects of amphetamines and violence. And so the two things that they would have been combining together to try and make people violent would be belladonna and speed. And what two things does Charles Watson end up fucking doing a ton of just before he ends up going out and committing some of the most violent crimes of the 20th century? He takes fucking belladonna and speed. So that's where like, this is odd, isn't it? Yeah. But it could also just be a coincidence. I know this sounds odd, but no, everyone was experimenting with everything they could take at this point in time. It could have just happened organically. They could have just accidentally been like fucking. And if you look into the story of how they took the belladonna, Brenda or Nancy Pittman meets some guy who says, "Oh, the Native Americans used to eat the root of this plant and have spiritual experiences on it," and so they just ripped it up and started trying to eat it. They cooked up some of the root, apparently, and Charles Watson, Tex, walked into the kitchen and he just picked up a chunk of it and ate it. He talks about it in his psychiatry report. His psychiatry report, sorry, as they say. They get him to talk about the situation. He just took a chunk of the stuff and ate it. He had no idea what it was. And then he carried on walking into town. And as he's walking into town, he starts to suffer the symptoms of the fact that it's poisoned him. It's brain damaging him. In that his mouth goes suddenly really dry. He starts foaming at the mouth. He feels really hot. He goes red. And he ends up crawling on the floor, unable to speak, and fucking... He thought he was in a car. If you read his psychiatry report, he remembers the police pulling him out of a car. But if you read the account of what was actually happening, he wasn't in a car. He was crawling down the middle of the road going beep, 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 right? And that's when the police nick him, right? But when you see the psychiatrist talking to him in his psychiatry report, this is how badly fucking tripping he was, right? He thought he was in a car and the police were pulling him out of a car. But what was really happening was he was crawling down, oh God. That's how bad this belladonna incident was. And this is, so like, part of what was wrong with Charles Watson. It wasn't that he was brainwashed by Charles Manson. It was that he was fucking brain damaged by the amount of drugs he'd been doing. That was what did it. Sorry, I'm just trying to read the chat. What did you say about the shrink? Excuse me, CIA contracted to hit something. Okay. I've never read that. Never read that. But yeah, fucking, who knows? What do you respond? No, because I've looked into that as well. Because it's actually really hard to find information about what psychiatrists examined all the others. Right? Texas psychiatry reports. because of all the different things that happened to him. He got examined by a lot of different psychiatrists. He gets examined by about 6 different psychiatrists. But if you look at what happened with the others, they appear to have not wanted to cooperate with psychiatrists, so they just didn't talk to the psychiatrists. But you can't go to court without fucking talking to a psychiatrist. They have to assess your mental health, right? So the only psychiatrist they talked to was a guy called Joel Fort. And Joel Fort also talks to Tex, but Joel Fort was paid by Bugliosi. He's for the prosecution, right? And he's the only one, as far as I know, Joel Fort is the only one that spoke to all of them. And Tex, because of what happened to him, because he gets moved to so many different prisons, there's different psychiatrists are looking at him at every different place. So he gets seen by about 6 different psychiatrists. So you get a more even look at how mentally ill he was. Yeah, he was. He was going beep beep. He was crawling. He was crawling when the police arrested him. He was crawling through a group of children, going beep 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 beep. And when in the psychiatry report, he remembers being in a car and the police dragging him out of a car. Right, so that's how badly he was tripping. He actually thought he was in a car. He wasn't. He was fucking crawling down the road. Yeah, they don't make drugs out of you. Yeah. Yeah, they don't do shit like that anymore. Fucking hell. No one just rips up belladonna roots and fucking eats them nowadays. Fucking yeah. Kids these days don't know they're born, man. Yeah, but it's a bloody strange case. And yeah, but so like in terms of did anyone from the CIA look at them? Because I looked at this because I was well, my main area of interest in this case is actually Tex Charles Watson himself. And so I was really, really interested in if he is a mind control fucking patient, then there's got to be some evidence that Jolyon West or someone looked at him at some point. And so I've looked really hard, right? I've looked as hard as I can. And there's a point when he's at Atascadero. So, because, oh God, what happens to him is he's initially when he's arrested, he's in Texas, and when he's held in prison in Texas, he's doing all right psychologically because his mother's still visiting him and helping him out, right? But then as soon as he gets moved to California, his mental health starts to deteriorate, and he ends up going into a weird state where he's just curled up in fetal position and he won't eat, and he does other stuff. I'm not even going to reveal it. So I'm eventually going to write a whole book about this shit, honestly. Right, but so then, and they're worried that he's going to commit suicide or he's going to die, so they move him from prison to Atascadero, which is like a prison for the criminally insane. And bloody Atascadero, that is a place that is associated with MK Ultra experiments. Like this is the kind of place where there might have been MK Ultra experiments. So look at who looked at him when he was at Atascadero, but no, there's no one that seems to be associated with MK Ultra that looks at him there. The only weird thing that happens is one day they take him from Atascadero to UCLA, neuropsychiatry unit, for some reason, and that is where Jolyon West worked. And it's not shown in the papers that he was shown to Jolyon West or whatever. But it seems weird to me because they move him to UCLA, and the only thing they seem to do is give him an ECG, which is just a thing where they put stickers on all over your head, and they monitor your brainwaves from the outside. And they could have done that at Atascadero. They would have the machine to do that at Atascadero. So it's like, why did they move him to UCLA just to do that? That seems a bit odd. But that's the only thing that I could find in all of this that it looks a little weird with Tex. Is that for some reason they move him to UCLA for one day and then move him back to Atascadero, and it just seems odd. And that's not true. I've watched this. No, I've actually really heavily researched this. Right now, he gets taken to the prison in California after he's transported. That isn't true. He wasn't put in. He was not put in a. He'd never put in a luxury prison. Atascadero, if you look into the reputation of Atascadero, is a terrifying place. It's not a nice place where they put him. They used treatments like they used to plug. They treated really dangerous criminals, obviously, but they did stuff like plugging sex offenders' testicles into car batteries and shit. You know, no, it was absolutely terrifying prison. No, he was never put in a luxury prison. He was always put in quite scary places. It was not a nice place. He was never put in any luxury prison. But no, they did move him away from people because the Manson people were bullying him. He was kept in confinement because of that. So that much is true. Like, because you can see when he's talking to his psychiatrist, he's trying to say, "I don't want to go with the Charles Manson stuff anymore. They're bullying me." You know. And so yeah, they did move him at certain points, so he wasn't getting influenced by people that were, you know, bullying him to say certain things on Charles Manson's behalf or whatever. But no, he was never put in a luxury prison. He went straight from the prison he was in California to Atascadero, then back to the California prison. He didn't go anywhere nice. Oh, sorry, wrong comment. It rolled up. Yeah. Manson a mentalist. All this stuff about was Charles Manson a fucking hypnotist or whatever. Boy, you got to understand something about it because Charles Manson had what we now call antisocial personality disorder. Psychopath and sociopath are fucking no longer a clinical diagnosis, right? But I would say Charles Manson was probably, though he was diagnosed a psychopath, so he was diagnosed as having no empathy. I think he was probably a sociopath. I think he had some empathy. And they are very superficially charming, and they can they can be hypnotic just by being so charming. I think that's the only way he was hypnotic. I don't believe he had hypnotic powers. He was a hypnotist. He did hypnotize them. I think there were young, drugged out girls that would fucking, and he was quite a dishy looking dude, wasn't he? I think they were hypnotized in that way, but no, he was not actually fucking controlling their minds like a mind control genius. That's just untrue, you know. Whether he's a mentalist, yes, it's just a fixed employee. Yeah, I see what you mean there. Yes, yes, and there was weird stuff that he did. Like if you listen to the girls talking about him, they say they witnessed him perform amazing feats like leap over large objects or bring a bird back to life, and they saw him do these miracles. And I think that was some kind of trickery. I think he did use trickery like that. And this stuff he does about throwing the cat. Have you heard? There's this thing about him to show to show them that you could be programmed to have no fear. He picked up a cat and threw it around, and from the sound of what happened there. And I love cats. I have cats myself, so I'm pissed off that he did this. But it sounds to me like well, I've never had an account. Did anyone see the cat get up and walk off after he had done that to it? Because I think it sounds like he'd actually break the cat's spine, and that's why the cat wasn't moving. The cat was fucking half dead. But yeah, I've never heard an account of what did after he had thrown the cat around. Did he put the cat down on the ground and the cat walked off? I doubt it. I think he'd actually hurt the cat. I think that's why the cat was acting the way it was, and why the cat was floppy as he was throwing it and wasn't trying to escape. I think he'd hurt the cat. So he wasn't in a men's colony. Do you mean Tex? No. Tex has always been kept kind of isolated, yeah, because of what he did. He would be targeted and fucking killed if he was not. He's always been kept in special prisons with weird sex offenders and shit like that. He's not put in normal general population sort of prisons now. He's always been kept isolated. Because he killed Sharon Tate. He stabbed a pregnant woman to death. Man, people don't react well to that, don't they? He's going to be targeted by other prisoners a lot. So no, they didn't. He was never in a colony or ever in general population ever, I don't think. No. Charles Manson was thrown in with general population more. They were cruel to Charles Manson. This is the other thing about people say Charles Manson was a CIA agent or was some kind of actor. And it's like, no way he was. Look at how they treated him when he was in prison. Man, he was given no special treatment. He was just put in with the general population. A guy managed to throw boiling liquid over him once and stuff. He was not given any protection. There's no way Charles Manson had any protection in prison. If you look at Charles Watson appears to have far more protection in prison than Manson ever had. Yeah, and this is another point. Yeah, this is my other weird point about Charles Manson and the fact I think that he may have been mind controlled in some way. Was a second part to the FBI reports got released about a year ago, and when you read it, it's not telling you anything about the crimes. It's a report about when Charles Manson was younger, way before the crimes, when he was at Terminal Island. And he tried to escape. And it shows you him being interviewed it's a transcript of him being interviewed by 2 FBI agents about how he tried to escape. And the thing that struck me about it is, it seems like you're talking to a completely different man. If you have advertised, if you read what you call the cadence of his words, the way he speaks is just totally different. And I'm not saying because if you look at how Charles Manson spoke later on in his life, you could say, he learned new slang when he was out on the streets or whatever. The way he spoke changed because he learned new slang or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. No, just the whole way he spoke was completely different. And he was very cooperative with the FBI men. He acts in a completely different way to the way you see him acting later in life. And that's what makes me think maybe something did go on at Terminal Island, and they did fucking mess with Charles Manson, because there's this interview with him, and because there's no footage of Charles Manson before the murders happened. The only footage you see of Charles Manson afterwards, and any interviews you see with him are after the murders have happened. And by then he knows he's been stitched up, he knows he's been portrayed, so he's ranting and screaming he's a different bloke, you know what I mean? There's very little for us to go on of what he was like before all this happened to him and that. But the thing that's weird about this Terminal Island thing is he seems to change too much. It's not just like he was traumatized by the way the guards treated him in the next prison and that changed him or whatever, or he learned new slang when he was out on the street and that changed him or whatever. It seems weird. It does seem like Charles Manson had a dramatic personality change, basically, is what I'm trying to get across. Yeah, and if you look across fucking all of their testimony, there are lots of weird shared statements they say. Lots of them all say the same thing. Start these motions, it would immediately turn on like a computer. And if you read Charles Watson Tex's psychiatry report, he also talks about computing. He says, I was like a computer. I was computing Charles Manson's voice in my mind. So they all use this phrase, computing and being like a computer. And another common phrase that you see used over and over again in the Hendrickson documentaries when they're being interviewed, you see the girls saying this, Sandy says it. And in all their psychiatry reports, as you're reading it, they all use this same phrase, Charlie put me through a change. which seems like a weird thing for them all to weird shared phrase. Yeah, and we were talking about something, and Charlie put me through a change, and they all say this weird shared phrase. And yeah, so there's lots of weird things like that that makes you think, what the hell was going on? And how did Charles Manson know to be saying all this stuff? Because Charles Manson had no psychology qualifications. He was not a hypnotist. He was not a psychiatrist. So this makes me think, fucking, was A. Smith prompting him, telling him what to do, telling him what to say to these kids? Because this is what it looks like to me. It looks like fucking someone... Charles Manson wasn't in charge of any of this, right? Someone was telling Charles Manson what to do. Charles Manson could not have done this on his own. He could not have fucking set it up the way he did. It's so weird because he gets them to sit down at 5 o'clock every night and drop LSD, and then he sits around the campfire with them. They all repeat this. This is the nightly ritual. And this does sound like a controlled drug experiment. It sounds like a controlled drug study. You get them all to sit down at a certain time of day and take the drug, and then you all talk and you watch them. It's like it sounds like some kind of controlled drug experiment going on. Charles Manson is being told what to do and what to say, and someone else is gathering the results. But I don't believe that what happened was the intended result. I think it was some kind of weird study or whatever. And I'm just rambling now, and I'm just rambling, talking. You know. But that's the weird thing. The weird things that jump out at me. Yes, this is the other quote that I was talking about. We've seen him do all kinds of things like this. We've seen him jump over the buildings and all this sort of thing. And you have to remember, he had them all on acid. They were all tripping. Anyway, it's quite easy to trick people that you jumped over something that was higher than it was if they're all much younger than you and on acid, right? Do you know what I mean? This is the kind of thing that was going on. He was tricking them into thinking that he'd done this. And I've also seen them say they saw him bring a bird back to life. There was a dead bird, and he held it in his hand, and he brought it back to life. And the bird just wasn't dead, was it? Obviously, it was. He got better. He nursed it back to health, or whatever. But the thing about the cat as well, I don't like that, because I think he hurt the cat. I think that's why the cat wasn't reacting. Because no one's ever told me they saw the cat get up and walk off again afterwards. You know, I think he killed the cat. The cat was fucking dead as he was throwing it around or whatever. Or its spine was broken, it couldn't resist him. You know. I think the interesting thing as well, because Tex does talk about the speed as well. He talks about how Charlie wanted to get him off the speed. Charlie didn't like him taking the speed. It's just another weird, interesting thing, isn't it? And it said, but I don't believe, right? Because when I look at Charles Manson, I've studied psychology. Charles Manson looks like a speed freak to me. I don't believe Charles Manson didn't take speed. I think Charles Manson was a speed freak. I think Charles Manson did do speed. Maybe that's why he didn't want the others to take it, because he fucking knew what it did to your brain, because he'd done it. No, I don't. I'll put it on the screen just in case anyone does. Does anyone know anything about Rick Boston? Well, I don't. But does anyone else? Oh, it's right. Yeah, well, Linda's whole backstory, she was just told what to say, wasn't she? Linda was told what to say immediately, because, right, because think about what these people were about to be charged with, and they were going to be sentenced to death. They all knew they were going to get death. They did get death. It was only through fluke circumstances that they managed to get commuted to life. They all got sentenced to the gas chamber, didn't they? And so if you was in Linda Kasabian's place, yeah, you would. I would take the deal. Who wouldn't? You know what I mean? And so she lied for whatever reason, you know. But that's just the most horrible thing about this case, is that she's the one who walked out of all of them. It's just like, what, really? Oh, it's just because it as a point we've raised, it's not until bloody Linda turns up that they get mega violent, I think. And they say they didn't use the word pigs. No one talks about the word pigs and used this revolutionary language until Linda shows up. It was Linda that gets them saying the word pigs. But then in the official narrative, she's portrayed as the virgin or innocent one that had just turned up and only been there for a month and was like, oh no. What? So no, but Linda's the one that sends them over the edge. We're saying that this is quotes from his book, isn't it? Yeah, I've read it, yeah. But no, I think that book that he wrote, if you actually look at his psychiatry reports, etc., right? I don't believe Tex had clear memory of any of this shit. I think that everything that he wrote in that book was made up later. He made it up later. I don't believe he actually really clearly remembers much. Because if you look at what the belladonna overdose that he took, what that actually does to someone's brain, he was literally, and they talk about this. There's Susan Atkins said something about it. They remember having to feed him, right? After he came back to the ranch after the belladonna incident, right? They can remember having to actually put the food in his mouth. He wouldn't eat and stuff like that, and he would just sit. He was in a semi-comatose state. He was really badly messed up by the belladonna. And I don't believe that he, could clearly remember enough to write that book. I think that was all manufactured stuff. The bird makes up for the cat. I was like, don't matter. You brought the bird back to life. So it don't matter if you killed the cat. So you're talking about Charlie doing speed, I assume you're talking to here, yeah. And yeah, I think Charlie did do speed, yeah, and I think you're right. He didn't pay due all the tweet tablets. Yeah, and that's probably why he didn't want speed getting out into the ranch, yeah, because if they got hooked on speed, then they'd be running after the the bikers instead of him, wouldn't they? Yeah. Yeah, and Charles Manson, when he talked to Nikolas as well, he got used to the girls waiting on him hand and foot. He ended up needing them because they did. They ran around and did everything for him. Imagine what that must have been like for a man like Charles Manson, who's used to being in prison. And if he didn't want to, he could just fucking sit in his chair all day, and they would bring him food and drink and whatever. He didn't have to get out of his chair at all if he didn't want to. Yeah, of course, Charlie was using speed. Yeah, I'm glad other people agree with me as well, because loads of people would say, "What? Yeah, no." But no, I think he was. I think he looks like a speed freak, someone that's damaged from having done too much speed in the past. If you watch interviews with him, the way he acted. Yes, they all had ghostwriters. So yeah, Susan's first book, yeah, was a ghostwriter. Mike's still here. Mike will know who the ghostwriter is. He knows everything. Mike will know who did her ghostwriting. And Texas one was that Pastor Ray, wasn't it? And he, if you look into him, he was just a guy who was just trying to make money off of having worked with someone so notorious. Yeah, he was just trying to gain money and notoriety of having worked with these people. God, I don't realise how long I've been going. I've been going nearly 2 hours, haven't I? With Marinus, I've been talking. I've been having conversations. Yeah, and I got my main point across at the beginning. Basically, yeah. Sorry about this channel. It was a clusterfuck of nonsense, but if you want better resources, look at the podcast channel and read these books. moving on to that. Right, so what else? So let's try and respond to him there. Oh, and the other point that I haven't talked about as well. When this whole case went down at this point in history, they didn't believe in psychology that women independently, excuse me, sorry, flowing in my throat, that women independently could plan violent crimes. They thought that women could only do it like under the instruction of a man, basically. So that's why these crimes went down the way they did. People so easily swallowed that Charles Manson had brainwashed these girls into doing it. Because it's a hard thing to swallow, isn't it? That young women were mainly the people. There was only one man there at Sierra Drive. It was mainly young women that did all that stabbing and all that. It's a horrific thought to think about, isn't it? And back in those days, they didn't believe that women could plan these things independently. And so this is another reason why Linda walked, and why everyone else, people like Susan and Leslie and Patricia Cranwinkle or whatever, were just seen as helpless, brainwashed young women, because at this point in history, that was the way they believed these crimes went down. They didn't believe women could independently plan these things. But if these things had happened nowadays, it would have gone down much differently. The women would have been scrutinised much more closely. And if you look at these crimes, I think that actually Linda Kasabian had more to do with the planning of these crimes than anyone else. Well, obviously Bernard Crowe she can't have been involved with, and Gary Hinman she wasn't involved with. But Cielo Drive she appears to have fucking very definitely much been involved with, and have done some kind of. The MDA deal was not just Tex, it was her and Tex. And I believe it was the money that she stole because, in all the transcripts and the court thing, they went back and she robbed her ex-husband, didn't she? Or her husband. She went and she stole a big sum of cash from her husband. And she says she went back to the ranch and directly handed it to Charlie. Well, I believe that's the money they went and tried to buy this MDA with or whatever. And no one's sure if it was just the MDA was bad or the MDA just never showed up. But somehow they ended up getting bumped on this MDA deal. And this is why they're so angry and they go up and they slash them up so bad on the night that the murders happened because of this drug deal that went wrong. So, should I read the chat? Yes, there's another thing. Yeah, it's like it sort of looks like not even so much it was engineered, but they let guys like Charlie out of prison and just watch them to see who they attracted and what they were doing or whatever. And they probably, when they were picking people to use in studies and experiments, it was probably people like Charles Manson they were watching to see who he attracted or whatever. It is. It's very bizarre. It's weird. And he was a lab rat. I'm sure they all were. They carried out experiments in all these prisons. And who gives a shit about prisons? This is why they do it to them, because who cares if you experiment on people that are criminals? So no one looks into it. Yeah, but when Charles Manson was younger, and when he wasn't, he hadn't even really done a bad crime that serious, really. It was about car theft. And when he was trying to take a woman across state lines, which is what in modern day you would say is across the border, wasn't it, into Mexico? So we're trying to people traffic. What you'd say nowadays? So that is quite a bad crime. But the point I'm trying to make is when he went into prison, he wasn't a hardened, murdering criminal. You know, it was like car theft and quite petty stuff he had done. And then he goes through Terminal Island and comes out, and fucking we end up with this guy. You know, so what? No, he wasn't like that at all before he went into Terminal Island. But again, if you read the Manson file, there was while he was in Mexico, he did loads of fucking hallucinogens with the locals and fucking had a weird, crazy spiritual awakening. So maybe that is what fucking caused him to change. It's not, you know, there's so many swings and roundabouts. Seen Juxtapositions Engai. Who's that? Who's Juxtapositions Engai? Who would that be? Who do you mean by that? Can you give me more information about who you mean? Have I seen him? Engai. Well, we're all lab rats. I think fucking they're watching all of us, mate. We're all fucking rats in their piece of it. They put all this shit out there. They release all these documents to the internet and see who picks it up and he starts talking about it. No, podcasts are good. At least they're doing it. They're out there doing it. They're regularly doing podcasts and they're talking about, you know, new findings. This is what our vision was. Our original vision was. This is what we wanted to do. But they do it much better. Unfortunately, Russ was not capable of doing it. He expected me to do everything. And then he wanted to take all the credit. Cool. I've been going for 2 hours now, so I think I better end this. I'm knackered. But thank you everyone for coming anyway. And I'll leave this stream up and I'll make sure that in the description there will be links to find the podcast channel if you don't know it already. And links to where you can get the 2 books. And yeah, thank you for coming, everyone that came. And yeah, and God bless you, Russ. Let's have a drink to Russ. Well, he was difficult to work with, but he was a laugh. And there's another, this is another fucking crazy point about this case as well. Things that he points out in Chaos, in the book Chaos, and I think he's way off on a lot of things. He makes too much of certain points. But one of the things he does point out is, isn't it weird that Charles Manson got away with all these fucking probation violations that he had, and including being busted at the ranch with all those guns, and he didn't get sent back to prison. They let him go. What the fuck, you know? So you can see why people think the CIA was involved and the CIA engineered all this. It's very, very strange. That seems odd to me. And people brush it off, go, oh, it's nothing. It's just the incompetent probation system or whatever. Maybe he gave a fake name when he was arrested. But no, bloody, you look at those photos of that raid happening, right? And the way they treated him, they knew exactly who he was. And they was humiliating him in front of his followers, right? They knew exactly who Charles Manson was. He was on probation. Why the fuck did he not get sent back to prison then? Why was he left out, you know, for so long? That is another weird thing that makes it look like something sinister was going on with the CIA or whatever, that this was engineered in some way. Why did Charles Manson get left out of prison as long as he did? Right. Oh, anything else to say? I'm trying to wrap up, but people make other points. So yeah, no, but that is another point that's always bugged me. And what is a good point that he does make in chaos, though it's not all of it relevant, and we shouldn't spend too much time looking into whether this, because yes, there were horrible MK Ultra experiments really going on at this point in history. But was it on these people in particular? No, I don't think so. I think it was going on in a lot of other places. And yes, they were probably touched by it. They did meet fucking doctors that were doing it or whatever, or they were in areas or they were in prisons where these things were going on. But did it really directly influence this case and the motive for the murders and all that? No, I don't think it did, to be totally honest. Sorry, trying to read the chat. Yeah. Subscribe to the No, sorry, wrong one. They don't get drunk, yeah. They're not sat there shit faced after 2 hours going, oh, sorry, you know. Go and watch the podcast instead of me. No, I've done this on my own as well. There's been no other presenter. I think I've done quite well, actually, to keep talking for 2 hours. Thank you, guys. Yeah, this is it. No, who can explain why Charlie fucking got out of jail at this point as well? Because you look in his past, any fucking probation violation he committed, he was slapped straight back in jail. Why did it suddenly change at this point? It does seem odd, doesn't it? And why, after that's the one that really gets me, is after that raid where they took all the guns and all that, and they very clearly know who he is. Look at the photos. You can see the photos of them fucking throwing him down on the ground. They're really brutal with him. They knew exactly who he was. Why did he not get sent back to prison? Something's weird going on. Yes, and there's evidence of that as well. That's actually not just a bullshit thing, is it? As well, there's evidence. There was loads of FBI operatives undercover at Spahn Ranch. That's the other thing. These people weren't fucking criminal geniuses. They couldn't even spot there was like 5 undercover fucking agents living on their fucking ranch, you know. So it's like, and you have to remember the other reason there was, though it looks like all this these agents all over the place. Does this mean it was CIA? Were the CIA involved making shit happen? You also have to remember there was a lot of drug surveillance operations going on, and these people were right in the smack bang in the middle of drug trafficking and people trafficking and gun trafficking. That's why there were so many fucking agents around them watching them, because they were fucking criminals. It's not because they were CIA agents mind controlling them. Because that's the thing that you're told when you listen to the official narrative is these people were all innocent people until they met Charles Manson. They fucking weren't. You look at the histories of all these kids was already doing drugs and all sorts before they met Charles Manson. He was not the corrupting force that they had. Yes, that's the good point. Yes, this is the point, right? Yes, I believe they did once the murders happened. Fucking the state and the CIA and everything was right on it, going, "Oh, look at the counterculture! It's all backfired. These kids took acid, and then they ran into the Hollywood Hills and fucking murdered Sharon Tate. Oh my god, yeah, they could take away the acid, everyone. Oh my god, yeah." I can see how they used it to crucify the counterculture once it had happened, but I don't believe that it was actually orchestrated to happen by the CIA, if you know what I mean. And the reason there was so many FBI agents, CIA agents around them and shit was because they were drug fucking peddling criminals. They were being surveilled under drug surveillance operations. It doesn't mean that the criminals were, you know, yeah. You think they were dosing him in prison? What you mean before the crimes when he was in Terminal Island? Was he being dosed with drugs? Charles Manson, I assume you're meaning. No, it's fucking possible. It's possible they were doing all sorts of drug experiments. I would not be surprised if they did do that. If we could prove it. Oh, sorry. Yes, just show this was said. Yeah. So don't sharpen stinking docks. They do. Sorry, no, they actually do. They do. No, you can find evidence there. It's all very fucking strange. Who the fuck was Reeve Whitson? We did a video about Reeve Whitson. Who the hell was that guy? Who did he work for? Was he FBI? Was he CIA? Did he work for the mob? Who the fuck was he? It's very strange. But everyone assumes he's CIA. But no, he could have been working for fucking anyone. Who knows who he was working for? He could have been Paul Tate's employee for all we know. Who knows? He was some kind of military intelligence officer of some sort, a law enforcement agent of some sort, wasn't he? Yeah, but no, if I can don't look to this channel for the next broadcast. I've just come back to do a bloody update. Look to the podcast for more updates, and I'll probably appear on the podcast at some point talking. Yeah, did you see the podcast have the latest documents? They're seeing all the latest documents. So they can see. Oh yes. Reeve Whitson fucking also there's this, oh god, when you read the Manson file, there's this place called Horn Avenue. And fucking basically it's in LA, isn't it? And basically everyone who was involved in the Manson case at some point seems to have had a place on Horn Avenue, and that this is another weird. All fucking. Well, you could see. Oh, is this the CIA? Was this deliberate, or was this really just a fucking really strange coincidence that all these people have to live on Horn Avenue? But no, it's not just Reeve Whitson. It's everyone. Tex and Bruce Davis lived on Horn Avenue at some point. There's everyone. Fucking. There's an episode of the podcast where he reads out the chapter about Horn Avenue. And it's where the woman committed suicide, supposedly on LSD, but did she really commit suicide? Was she killed because she witnessed something? And everything happened on Horn Avenue. Oh my god, I'm just drunk and rambling now. Honestly, look at the podcast. Read the Manson file. This is. Yeah, and the mob and the organised crime. They're all over Horn Avenue. They're all over this whole fucking case. Everyone. Fucking the LaBiancas, right? Because this is the other weird thing. What was the motive for them targeting the LaBiancas? Fucking everything, right? Look, everything was the motive for why they targeted the fucking LaBiancas. The LaBiancas were up to their necks in all sorts of shit. Again, the LaBiancas are portrayed as this innocent middle-class couple that were a supermarket owner and a dress shop owner. You look into their lives, no, they fucking weren't, right? Luna LaBianca was in gambling debt to the mafia, and Rosemary LaBianca had been into all sorts of seedy stuff and was involved with dealing LSD and all sorts of shit. Yeah. Oh god, yeah, and this is fucking Wojtek Frykowski, drops a woman off a J after a date on the fucking corner of Horn Avenue. Yeah, oh my god, yeah, this is another one. Another weird synchronicity. But no, there's a whole chapter in the Manson file, and Paul reads it out admirably. Yeah, and it's not just a weird fucking thing in this case. And isn't it also somehow linked to the Wonderland murders as well? There's also another fucking bizarre link to the fucking Wonderland murders in Horn Avenue. It's the whole thing just destroys your brain. Oh, who else was it? It was everyone. Bruce Davis and Tex somehow lived on Horn Avenue at some point, didn't they? Oh, God. Place in LA. And there's so much that we could talk about. So this is the other thing about Squeaky as well. We never talked about Squeaky, have we? She's a fucking sinister woman. No one ever says is she CIA, right? Squeaky, look into her, right? What was her major? Fucking psychology. Right? Squeaky studied psychology, right? Squeaky was a psychologist. She did the same degree as me. That's what freaked me out about her when I fucking see her. I'm like, oh my god. And I think, no, she's far more sinister than people think. I think she had far more fucking role in planning these crimes and getting away with these crimes. And she got away with everything, didn't she? She had to fucking literally go and try and shoot the president before they'd locked her up. She could not get locked up. She was the best master criminal of this whole fucking group. Like, they never nicked Squeaky for nothing, did they? So look at Squeaky. It's all about Squeaky as well. Bless her. Oh, thank you. I'm going to wrap it up in a minute. Honestly, I'm just wrapping up. Yeah. And the funny story about Paul when I was at the book signing, when I picked up my copy of the Manson file, obviously they were taking photos of us at the event, and it was being posted to social media. And so a picture had been posted of me stood with Nikolas holding the book. And I happened to be stood next to Nikolas when Nikolas got a message off Paul from the podcast saying, I'm glad Nancy's there. Nancy's cool. And Nikolas handed me his phone and said, talk to Paul. And so I actually responded as Nikolas said, oh, hi, it's Nancy. Thank you. And it's just a funny moment. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, Squeaky says Crockett was a military deprogrammer. She's probably a military programmer. She's probably the mind control genius behind it all, if we look into it deeply, mate. Squeaky was probably Jolly on West's daughter or something. If you really look into it. No, but I've always had a weird feeling about Squeaky. I will say that. I've always had a weird feeling that, yeah, Lynette from has more to do with this than it looks like she had. And it fucking looks like she had a lot to do with it. Yeah, if you look at it, you know, I mean, yes, she was good as hell, but no. I think she actually had more to do with the planning and execution of these crimes than she ever was found guilty of. Right, are we done now? Finally. So I've been going for over 2 hours, haven't I? Yeah, I've got to go. I've got to go to sleep. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and God bless Russ. Though he was a bastard and difficult to work with, he was a laugh. Bless him. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Yeah, I've got to end the stream now because I'm knackered. I've drank too much. It was a good stream. Thank you, everyone. Read the Manson file. Read Neil Sanders' book. Watch the podcast, and you can't go wrong. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Yeah, it's into Russ. Yeah, just before I end it. Russ. Let's remember Russ. Though he was an awkward bastard, he was a nice bastard, really. Good night, everyone. Thank you.